For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh. Revi. On Talking Point, we're discussing Prime Minister Narendra Modi's state visit to the US and our expert analysts, both in Washington, D.C. Nitin Gokhale, founder and editor of StratNews Global, BharatShakti and Interstellar, and Seema Sirohi, who's a columnist with the Economic Times. A warm welcome to all those viewers who are joining this live stream, and a welcome to those viewers who will pick this up later on our YouTube channel. As we said, both our analysts are strategic experts and are joining us from Washington, D.C., direct from there. Welcome to Nitin Gokhale and Seema Sirohi. Thanks so much for giving us time after a very busy few days.
Yes, Amitabh, thank you for this because, yes, it's been quite busy in the last 3-4 days, and I think more than me, Seema has been busy reporting and entire visit and writing about it. So,
True.
Yeah, I mean, but there is...
Nitin, just wanted to get straight into, like the big ticket defense deals that were announced, the GE F414 engines produced in India, signing on of an MOU at least. Still a while, I guess, to ink the actual deal. It's been described as landmark, trailblazing in the joint statement. How much of a strategic jump, Nitin, is it when it goes through in terms of staggered transfer of technology, what I presume?
I think what's going to happen with the F414 engine, which is going to be manufactured and produced in India, is a leapfrogging from a transactional relationship that US, or a buyer-seller relationship that US and India had so far, to a joint collaboration and co-production as far as the jet engine technology is concerned, which is a great leap, because the engine technology is something that India has been lacking, and that it has chosen, GE and the governments have chosen Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, is a huge vote of confidence. And also the American mindset change in transferring this technology. Up to 80% of the jet engine technology is expected to be transferred initially in that co-production and co-manufacturing, which will happen gradually as the fine print is worked out. But the very fact that the US has decided to part with that technology itself is something that is commendable, and I think shows the confidence that both countries have in each other, because this is going to be a game changer for the Tejas Mark II fighter jet that is being manufactured by the HALE. And this will bring in many more benefits, which we can talk about as we go forward.
I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can. Yes.
I was just saying, Seema, in one of your pieces, you had written that an official described the transfer of technology of GE engines as crown jewels. But explain to our viewers Congressional Approval, the Arms Control Act, which both have to be cleared, and what you wrote in terms of reported $3 billion MQ-9B deal, which should make the engine deal easier.
Yes. So it is a really path-breaking deal, because until now, as you know, India has been asking for jet engine technology for a while. It was discussed before under the previous framework of defense technology and trade partnership, DGTI, but nothing moved, and that subgroup was shut down. So this time, something clearly has changed in the US strategic calculation. And so it's a multi-layered process. The administration, parts of it, let's say, are really gung-ho about doing this. Then there are sections within the administration, they are a little more skeptical. Then there's the whole question of the process. So first, all the administrative agencies have to agree. Then the State Department sends a congressional notification to the two foreign relations committees, the House and the Senate. Then it's examined there. They have 30 days to respond. And they'll ask questions in the meantime, which the State Department, the White House, and all the experts have to answer to their satisfaction. So while the MOU is signed, and that's a huge step, there's still some little bit left in the process. So we have to wait and see how long that takes.
Nitin, in terms of fighter jet engines, there was competition from Safran and to an extent even Rolls-Royce. There are reports that the Rafale marine aircraft could possibly be cleared on the Prime Minister's Bastille Day visit next month. How do you see, Nitin, India's arms diversification? And are these deals, say, helping the US try and wean India away
I
from
think
legacy reliance on
India's
Russian arms?
that that's true, Amitabh. I think it's arms sourcing and the over dependence on Russian technology, Russian weapons systems, so far has now told India that it is not a good thing to happen. And of course, for some years now, almost 15 years, India has been diversifying. India has bought $20 billion worth of weapons platforms or platforms from US, for instance. It has submarines from the French earlier and the Rafales in 2016. So it is not a surprise that going forward for the advanced medium combat aircraft that India is planning for its Air Force, they might look at Safran engine and also as a concurrent benefit from the French by the marine Rafales from them to begin with. So I think it's a hedging strategy that India is adopting, which is nothing new or surprising, and which should be done by every nation that wants its national interest to be protected. So I think it's a win-win for everyone. US gets the GE engine to India, the French get the Safran engine to India, and the Russians continue to dominate even today the Indian armed forces equipment. So I think India couldn't have been in a better place than what it is today to be friends with everyone and get whatever it wants to the best of its own national interest.
Sure. Nitin, just request you to lower the speaker volume a bit because it's resonating when I speak on the microphone. But just going over to Seema again. Seema, criticism on the so-called slide in democracy in India, minority rights, press freedom, authoritarianism, in an interview by a former president. And that's the operative part, a former president. He did different when he was president, as you pointed out. How do you see the reaction by President Biden and Prime Minister Modi on those issues?
See, so far, the administration has sort of said that they'll discuss all these issues, but privately. They don't want to make a public hue and cry about it. And as President Biden mentioned in his remarks at the welcome ceremony and later and in the press conference, yes, these are important issues. And there is a debate on India that gets sometimes kind of heated, sometimes becomes a political football in Washington, sometimes people use it to further their own agendas. So it's a mix of motives, shall I say. But the debate is real. And I was reading an article this morning by Professor Rajagopalan. He says that this burden that gets put on the administration to keep having to defend India on this particular issue is not good in the long run. So we might want to address it, etc. But to explain to your viewers, in the Congress, there were a few people, like I think 5 members of Congress, who boycotted Prime Minister Modi's address. and about 70 senators and congressmen and women signed a letter, which was very nuanced, if I may say so, to President Biden, praising the relationship, saying how important it is, how they want India and the US to be better friends. But at the same time, they requested the president to raise the democracy issue, the human rights issue, press freedom, and all that. So I suspect this debate will continue. As for former President Obama making those comments, I felt personally the comments were kind of stark in the sense that he was talking about a future Muslim India pulling away from Hindu India, etc. That's not the way I think most people would perceive it, even the harshest critics who've been in public with their statements. Certainly, the Biden administration will not appreciate it because in the past there have been issues when the Biden officials have felt that former Obama officials are constantly on TV in various programs and sort of, very free with their advice. They don't like it.
Nitin, there's so many other issues, of course. Semiconductors, cumulative, I believe, $2.7 billion at Micron has an investment plan. There's AI, there's 5G, 6G, quantum. How much is actually going to fructify? For example, if you look at the landmark nuclear deal, without doubt, it, of course, changed critical strategic parameters, but there was very little US investment till date for many different reasons, of course.
Should I?
Nitin.
Yes.
Sure. I no, you asked me that, right?
Yeah, Nitin.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, no, I agree with you that while there's a lot of points in that statement which are new about the future of the technology and the future technologies that will be jointly worked upon. But I was at that IndusX roundtable organized by USIBC and the Indian MOD, SIDM, and others were also there, and lots of startups from both sides were there. So one of the main points that I made during my remarks was that going by what happened in the DGTI initiative launched about 8-9 years ago, and that it has not gone anywhere. One of the lessons learned is there has to be an early success of these joint projects and innovations that are being planned between Indian innovators in defense and US companies or US innovators here. Only then one can actually confidently say that this will work. But on the semiconductors front, I think it is realistic because the companies that have been mentioned here have already committed to putting up money. The entire project is about $2.75 billion, but the Micron Technology is going to put in about $800 million, and Applied Materials also announced a semiconductor center for commercialization. Apart from that, LAM's research, and I think this is more important, it has committed to educate and create an Indian ecosystem of 60,000 engineers, which are required for semiconductor system to be built in India. It is not easy. It is not easily doable unless they are trained, unless they know the technology. And I think that's the start point as far as the semiconductor industry is concerned. And I'm sure that the Indian semiconductor mission is going to be playing a major part in this, helped by these private sector companies from the US, Micron, Applied Materials, and LAM Research. That's, I think, is an important part. But more than that, I think there are other aspects in space, air, and which need to be very clear.
Right, Nitin, just again a request, if you could just leave the studio and join us. I think we have a problem. Join us again because we had some problems with the audio and the video. Meanwhile, I'll ask Seema another question. Seema, the reception at the joint Congress session, I think media counted it and reported 12 to 15 standing ovations, 70 plus incidents of applause, autograph seeking post the Prime Minister's speech. What do you read into that?
Yeah, the speech was good. It had a lot of zingers and it resonated. And the I think the applause and ovation was genuine because Prime Minister Modi checked the boxes that he needed to check. That is, talk about Ukraine, and talk about China. Of course, he didn't name Russia or China, but there was a lot of code language in that speech, which everybody who knows anything about Indian foreign policy or the relationship between India and the US will understand. So, as for China, the Prime Minister said that dark clouds of coercion and confrontation are sort of darkening the Indo-Pacific. And the Quad is the grouping of India, Australia, Japan, and the US is kind of a bulwark against this whole thing. In terms of Russia's war against Ukraine, he talked more about human suffering, the global south, and how this is not an era of war, which was the one line he repeated from his previous, when he met Putin, he had said it first. But it was so popular in the West. Everybody latched onto it and for their own purpose, because that was the strongest, the closest India came to sort of pointing a finger at Russia for this war. So he repeated it, got the applause. So these two issues the Congress wanted to hear from India, and the Prime Minister delivered. Then, as for Indian issues that he wanted to press, one was terrorism. He really came on strong on that. And the finger was pointing straight at Pakistan. He was pressing his advantage because now Pakistan is in Washington today, kind of a has-been country. People are not talking about it very much. This whole visit was so grand in so many ways at so many levels that I'm sure both the Pakistani and Chinese diplomats are sort of analyzing it, and they will do so for days to come. So he used very strong language on terrorism to the US Congress to let the lawmakers know that action needs to be taken against the Mumbai attackers, and they should be, quote, no ifs and buts, unquote, about fighting terrorism. Then he talked about, I think, one very important thing that's happening in India that Westerners don't appreciate quite enough is the digital revolution. He has been explaining it to various audiences, and he spoke about it to the US Congress, and with numbers and statistics that went down very well. And in the joint statement, the US is going to work with India to about taking this digital payment platform to other countries. India has wanted that from the US wanted the US to join India in taking it abroad, as it were, and they have agreed. So there was a lot of, give and take during this visit. The joint statement reflects that. And I have been saying that this is now kind of sounds like or feels like a relationship more of equals. And India negotiated hard. Americans always negotiated hard. Indians also negotiated hard, but this time they got more of what they wanted.
They got more of what they wanted, Nitin. I'm hoping your line is much clearer now. You mentioned Artemis. You mentioned an Indian astronaut in space in 2024. Indus also you talked about. Ship repairs, maintenance, which have already, by the way, started in India. How critical can that be, Nitin, for US presence in the Indo-Pacific?
I think again that's a start. I was speaking to the shipyards. Are you able to hear me clearly? Is first thing I
Yeah.
must ask you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the start has been made. L&T shipyards have received some of these ships for minor repairs to begin with. U.S. ships, U.S. warships passing through, but as it sort of picks up pace, because US has a large presence in Indo-Pacific. The US Navy, in fact, has a larger presence than anybody else in the Indo-Pacific. The Indo-PACOM command sort of straddles both the oceans, as everybody is aware, and therefore it is a good recurring business for Indian shipyards, including what L&T is doing. So that's one. Of course, the Artemis Accords, which is again was denied to India when it began, has been brought in, and the NASA ISRO collaboration is an old partnership, of course. But the very fact that now they're talking about manned missions to moon and beyond itself gives hope to the Indian space system, because, as you know, the Indian private sector in space is now coming up. It is gaining resurgence or gaining traction, really, and it's just not ISRO. So I think it's going to have a cascading effect on the emerging ecosystem for the Indian space industry. And of course, as I mentioned, semiconductors, there is also AI and quantum computing, all that's going to come in. But I'm more, sort of realistic about what's happening in defense. I mean, we've spoken about GF 414 engines, but even the Predators or MQ-9Bs that have been now granted acceptance of necessity by the Indian Defense Ministry will have a effect that cannot be really counted at the moment or quantified. But I'm sure it's going to have a downstream effect on many of the startups and MSMEs, particularly in the defense sector.
Seema, the China factor. President Biden hasn't pulled back from his "she is a dictator" statement as the US is trying to manage the China challenge. But how much of a common factor is that in the trajectory that both India and the US are moving in?
Oh, China is the biggest elephant, or shall I say, the biggest dragon in the room, of course. The challenge of China is common to both India and the US. India was always awake to the challenge because we have China on the border, but the Americans took their time to wake up to it. Now they seem fully awake, and they want to get as many partners as possible on their side. And so together, the world can face this challenge, because the rise of China was not peaceful. You know, remember the time when the world was promised a peaceful rise of China? That kind of did not turn out to be a fact. China's rise is anything but peaceful. Under Xi Jinping, they are lashing out everywhere against all countries around them, including India. As we know, since 2020, we are in a hot border situation with them. So, yes, China is a very big factor, but neither country wants to say so in public. Because the relationship truly is also about many, many other things. Both leaders tried to frame it in terms of people to people bonds. And that is indeed true. You know, at the welcome ceremony, there were thousands of Indian Americans. You know, I don't think I've seen that kind of a crowd in my time over here. And for the White House to allow that many people to come. So, yes, the relationship is increasingly on many planks. China being one that brings this strategic thinking close together. But there are many other planks. The new plank is this technology, the new age technology, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and all that. But people to people bonds are also very important. And I think Prime Minister Modi uses that very effectively. Whenever he goes abroad, he gets the diaspora going, and the leadership in that country can see that. And that's very interesting in the dynamics.
Talking about dynamics, Nitin, what about the quote unquote historical hesitation that India has for the US because of past US behavior? The suspicion of being left high and dry, is it still there?
Well, it's difficult to pass judgment on that at the moment. This is a high point of India-US relations in the past 20, 25 years. Although the defense relationship has been the graph has been going upwards for almost 2 decades now, I would say. But I would think India will still hedge its bets. It will not put all its eggs in the US basket, which is fair. I think even the US understands that, because while the US has its own dynamics in its relationship with China, India also believes that it has to solve the border issue or take on China, stand up to China on its own, with help from friends like US, and that is what is being done right now, which I think is a practical approach to the as opposed to what used to be earlier, that either this or that. So either or approach is gone. India is now sort of hedging. It's also doing multi-alignment. So while it is friendly with, it's getting many of the things from US, as we have already discussed, but it is not going to stop from going to Russia. In the sense, 50% of India's armed forces equipment so far remains Russian origin, or the former Soviet Union origin, and that fact cannot be ignored. And therefore, India will continue to try and have good relations with Russia and US at the same time, which fortunately the US administration has started recognizing and understanding, which was lacking earlier, and it has to be either or earlier, which I think is an inflection point in my view in the larger scheme of things. Defense is a central pillar. It is the technology that is now getting into the new adrenaline that Pankaj Saran, former Deputy NSA, spoke to me last week while we were discussing ahead of this visit of Prime Minister, that technology will bring in the new adrenaline in the relationship between US and India. But some of the old pillars like defense will remain. And the hesitation of history that you spoke about may have reduced, but India will continue to be cautious in completely siding with the US.
Seema, just curious about how the mainstream US media, both print and broadcast, treated this visit.
They kind of focused on the democracy question and the letter from senators and congressmen. So yes, their focus was kind of then it was affected by former President Obama's comments. But I think in the run up to the visit, there were some very good stories, especially in the Wall Street Journal, and the trade press, financial press covered all these deals very in great details. So yeah, there's good coverage. But if New York Times and the Washington Post have kind of focused on one aspect.
Mm. Nitin, as Seema mentioned, the dragon in the room. I mean, privately, I would presume both talk about it intensively, China that is, but maybe not publicly. But just wanted your take as an aside. Richard Gere being invited, Professor Thurman, both known Tibetan activists who had a one-on-one meeting with the Prime Minister. And of course, there was Yoga Day as well, where Richard Gere was there. Is that some kind of a prickling message to the Chinese Communist Party?
I think the Chinese take everything as a message. All the developments that would have happened in the past 3 days would be watched by the Chinese very closely. They constantly speak about how India should not become an ally of United States. In my private meetings with the Chinese, in track 1.5, track 2, even at the Shangri-La dialogue when I sort of interacted with the Chinese, Their constant refrain was India is too big a country and too independent thought process it has to ally or become a junior ally of the United States, and it must watch out not to become one going forward. But by doing what India is doing right now, they would actually strengthen their own suspicions, and their worst fears might just come true. Although India makes it very clear that it is not an ally, it's a partner, equal partner. And as many Americans now say, that finally the US has woken up to what India can bring to the table when it comes to handling China. While containment is a very strong word and it's something which riles China, when you talk about Quad, you talk about the resilient supply chains and the frontline state, India being a frontline state of US for its containment. All that is something that China will keep talking about. India is conscious about it, and I think US is now also realized that it is not going to publicly say this, even if privately they have long discussions and dialogues on how to handle China, how to meet the China challenge in a combined way, jointly going forward. And I think that conversations would have happened. Those conversations would have happened in this visit very extensively, I would think. And we will get to know a little more, as we analyze and get more information. But you're right. I mean, it will be done. And China is, I think both countries must thank China for bringing them together on such a higher level of engagement.
Seema, one quick last question. In a decade, when you write your next book, will it be called India and the US Friends with Much More Than Just Benefits?
Thank you for the title. But yeah, I can say that the relationship really has moved. There's no question about it. It's in the next phase, next sphere. It's called, this visit was called a transformative moment, pivotal moment. I must say the US officials, while briefing journalists, have used terms that I cannot imagine Indian officials ever using, and they did not. But I think the substance of the joint statement, the atmospherics around the visit, and the general sort of goodwill that you feel at a people to people level, things have really changed and improved for the better. So I think that it'll continue on that positive trajectory unless there's some black swan moment or event. I think all is good.
Seema Sirohi, absolutely appreciate our time at the fag end of a very busy week for you.
Glad to be with you.
And then we'll see you back with a lot more information and analysis, I think, from this trip. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks, Amitabh.
And just a reminder to our viewers, you can help support us. There's a link that is in the descriptor. And also a reminder, if you haven't so far, to watch our on-the-ground reports from Arunachal Pradesh along the China front, commanding the Tawang Heights. We'll have episode 4 next Friday. This is Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.